We need to restructure power in this relationship because it benefits you. My wife wanted to reshape our marriage with feminist rules, so I followed her system perfectly and forced her to face real equality in the hardest way possible. I never imagined I'd need to use my wife's own feminist manual to prove the problem wasn't the marriage, it was the theory. 3 weeks. That's how long I was away on a business trip, and somehow in that interval, my wife managed to simply lose her mind. I walked in the door expecting our normal welcome routine, but instead, she handed me a printed document titled Restructuring Our Marriage, a milestone towards equality. She stood there seriously as if she were about to present a corporate report and began to explain that she had participated in something called a feminist empowerment workshop while I was away. Apparently, that workshop opened her eyes to all the ways in which our marriage was supposedly oppressive and patriarchal. You need to understand that I've been living in a system that benefits you while it harms me, she said, even making air quotes. We need to deconstruct the power dynamics of our relationship. I put my suitcase on the floor and looked at the woman I'd been married to for 7 years. The same woman who laughed at my jokes and rolled her eyes when I left dishes in the sink. Now she was standing there with a 3-page document explaining why our relationship needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. The first page detailed something called redistribution of emotional labor. According to her new enlightenment, I had been benefiting from her invisible work while contributing only financially. She wanted me to take responsibility for remembering anniversaries, planning social events, and managing the household schedule. Fair enough, I thought, until I got to the part where she wanted me to log my emotional contributions on a shared spreadsheet. Page 2 talked about equality in domestic chores. Every household task had been categorized, weighted by difficulty and time, and then divided exactly in half. Cooking was now divided by days of the week, cleaning by rooms. Even grocery shopping had been broken down into a rotating system. She literally created a chore chart, as if we were college roommates. But page 3 was where things really got interesting. It was titled Deconstructing Male Privilege. Basically a list of ways I needed to change how I communicated, made decisions, and even sat on the couch. Apparently, sitting with my legs open was now a violation of shared space equity. This isn't about changing who you are, she explained with the confidence of someone who just discovered fire. It's about recognizing the unconscious ways in which you perpetuate harmful patterns. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took out a beer. The same beer from the same place as always. Nothing had changed in that house, except her perspective. And somehow that made everything different. So, let me see if I understand, I said, taking a long swig. While I was working 60 hours a week to pay for this house, you were in a workshop learning that I'm the problem in our marriage. She began to explain how financial contribution doesn't equate to emotional contribution and how traditional gender roles created an imbalance that needed to be corrected. She used terms like heteronormative expectations and internalized patriarchy with the excitement of someone who just learned a new language. I listened to the entire presentation, asking questions, asking for details about the spreadsheet system and the scoring of the tasks. When she finished, she stood there looking at me, expecting me to argue or immediately embrace this new model of marriage. Instead, I took the document from the counter and reread it calmly. The level of detail was impressive. She had clearly spent hours researching, planning, and organizing this complete overhaul of our relationship. You know what? I said, putting the papers back down. You're absolutely right. Let's make our marriage fairer. When do we start? The relief on her face was instantaneous. She was prepared for resistance, arguments, maybe even anger. What she didn't expect was total acceptance. She began to explain the implementation schedule, how we would track progress, and what success would mean according to her new system. I finished my beer, nodding along, already planning exactly how I would handle this. She wanted equality. She was going to get more equality than she ever imagined. She wanted to apply feminist theory to marriage. Perfect. I was going to apply male reality to her expectations. The next morning would be interesting. We woke up to the sound of her alarm at 6:30 a.m. Not mine, hers. According to the new system, each of us was responsible for our own morning routine. No me getting up first to make coffee. No her bringing me a cup while I got dressed. Everything separate, everything equal. We were now operating as two independent units within the same house. I watched her stumble to the kitchen, clearly expecting the usual routine where coffee just magically appeared ready. Instead, she found the coffee maker empty and a note I had left on the counter. Day 1 of the equitable coffee distribution. Your turn. According to the Monday schedule. She stared at the note for a good 10 seconds before starting to mutter something about malicious compliance while she struggled to place the coffee filters. I was already dressed and ready to go when she came back from the kitchen, still in her pajamas, holding a half-full cup. You could have made coffee for both of us, she said, clearly irritated. That would violate the milestone of equality in domestic chores, I replied, grabbing my keys. According to page 2, making coffee on Monday is one of your designated tasks. I don't want to perpetuate the patriarchal pattern of doing things for you that you can do for yourself. Her expression was unforgettable. She opened her mouth to reply, but closed it again, realizing she couldn't complain about me following the exact rules she had created. That night, when I got home, I found my wife sitting at the dining room table with another stack of papers. This time she had expanded the original document with what she called communication protocols and conflict resolution guidelines. I've been thinking about our interaction this morning, she began, and I realized we need more structure around how we discuss these changes. She had created an entire system for addressing what she called resistance behaviors and passive-aggressive responses to the new model. There were guidelines for healthy male emotional expression and demands that I acknowledge my defensive patterns before expressing any disagreement. So, now I need permission to have an opinion? I asked. It's not permission, she said patiently. It's about creating space for productive dialogue, recognizing when your male conditioning prevents you from engaging authentically. I sat down across from her and pulled the papers closer. She had divided male communication problems into categories: dismissive responses, logical deflection, emotional stonewalling, and defensive rationalization. Each category had examples and suggested corrections. This is fascinating, I said, genuinely analyzing the document. You've basically created a manual on how I can and cannot speak to you. It's not control, she insisted. It's awareness. These patterns are so ingrained that you probably don't even realize when you're doing them. I skimmed the pages, noticing how any possible male response to her system was classified as problematic. Questioning the logic was a dismissive response. Pointing out practical flaws was defensive rationalization. Wanting to discuss alternatives was resistance behavior. What if I just disagree with something? I asked, what's the approved method for that? She perked up, clearly excited to explain. First, you acknowledge that your disagreement may be coming from a place of privilege. Then you reflect on whether your response serves the relationship or just protects your comfort. Finally, you express your concern while reaffirming your commitment to growth and equality. I felt thoughtful. So, basically, I need to assume I'm wrong before I can even give my opinion. Are you doing that now? She said, pointing to the document. Logical deflection followed by defensive rationalization. Can you see how that prevents a productive dialogue? I looked at the woman who used to laugh at my sarcasm and appreciate my frankness. Now she was analyzing my every word through the lens of some theory she absorbed at the workshop. You know what? You're right again, I said, getting up. I can see how my natural communication style can be problematic. I'm going to need time to internalize these new protocols. She seemed satisfied, probably thinking she had identified and corrected my behavioral patterns. What she didn't realize is that I was about to give her exactly what she asked for, applied with the same rigidity and literalness that she demanded from me. I spent the next hour in my office, not watching TV, not checking emails as I usually did. Instead, I was also creating a document. If she wanted to restructure the marriage based on theoretical structures, I was going to present some theories of my own. The title was simple: Practical Applications of Reciprocal Expectations in Marriage. It was time to find out how committed she really was to this new system of equality. The next morning, I presented my wife with her own set of documents during breakfast. She had a confused expression when I slid the folder towards her next to the Tuesday oatmeal preparation, which was her responsibility according to the schedule. What's this? She asked, opening the first page. Your key performance indicators, I replied, taking a sip of the coffee I had prepared as per my Tuesday duty. If we're restructuring this marriage based on equality and accountability, then we need measurable results for both parties. Her eyes widened as she read the title, Reciprocal Expectations Framework, Monitoring Contributions in the Relationship. I had spent 3 hours the previous night creating a complete system that exactly mirrored her approach, but focused on results, not theory. Section 1 covers the monitoring of financial contribution. I explained, since you wanted transparency in domestic work, I thought it was fair to also monitor the economic work. She skimmed pages and pages of spreadsheets showing mortgage payments, electricity and water bills, car insurance, groceries, and personal expenses. Each item color-coded according to who earned the money that paid for it. This is ridiculous, she said. Marriage is not a business transaction. Exactly my point, I replied. But if we're going to treat relationship contributions like an accounting balance sheet, then we need to include all contributions, not just the ones that favor your narrative. Page 2 detailed what I called reciprocal communication patterns. If I needed to acknowledge my male conditioning before expressing disagreement, then she needed to acknowledge her emotional reasoning before making demands. If I had to track my defensive patterns, she had to track her manipulative ones. I'm not manipulative, she protested. According to your own framework, that's defensive rationalization, I replied, using her exact terms. The very fact that you're resisting examining your patterns suggests some unconscious bias. She looked at me frustrated, but without an argument. After all, I was using her logic. Section 3 was my favorite, equality in emotional labor. If she wanted me to remember anniversaries, plan social events, and organize calendars, then she needed to equally assume responsibility for the yard, car maintenance, and home repairs. If emotional labor was really work, then all work should have the same value. You can't be serious about me changing the car's oil, she said. Why not? It's just work. According to your workshop material, gendered task allocation is a patriarchal construct. Or are you saying there are tasks naturally more suited for men? She opened her mouth to answer and closed it. She had trapped herself in her own rules. The final section dealt with accountability metrics. Every failure in the new standard would be recorded. Every application of different rules for different people would be noted. Every time she expected me to change while she remained the same would be documented. This is petty, she said, pushing the folder away. This is equality, I corrected. You wanted to eliminate imbalances in the relationship. I'm just making sure the balance works for both sides. That afternoon, I implemented the system with the same enthusiasm she had shown for the feminist framework. When she asked me to pick up her dry cleaning because she was running late, I consulted the reciprocal expectations document and politely declined. It wasn't Tuesday, my designated day for external errands. When she suggested ordering pizza because she didn't want to cook, I reminded her that emotional labor included meal planning and that changing the plan last minute would need to be recorded as a deviation from the schedule. By evening, she was already clearly irritated with the rigidity with which I was applying the rules. She wanted to discuss modifications to the system, but according to her own communication protocols, before proposing any change, she needed to acknowledge that her resistance might be coming from a place of privilege, examine whether her concerns served the relationship or just her own comfort. After struggling to get through that script, she finally said, "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I wanted you to be more aware of how you contribute to the relationship. I didn't want to turn everything into a competition, but that's exactly what you created." I replied, "You divided our marriage into categories, assigned values, created metrics and accountability systems. The only difference is that I'm applying the same standards to both of us, instead of just to me." She was silent for a moment, looking at the papers scattered across the table, spreadsheets, protocols, tracking systems, all created to solve problems that didn't exist until she decided they did. "Maybe we should go back to how things were before," she said quietly. "Which part?" I asked. "The part where I was unconsciously oppressive or the part where you were unconsciously oppressed? According to your framework, we now know too much to go back." She looked exhausted, and for the first time since I got back from that business trip, I saw a glimpse of the woman I married, the one who understood that relationships work through mutual respect and natural balance, not through rigid systems and behavioral spreadsheets. But we weren't there yet. She needed to understand that equality is not imposed by documents and metrics. A true partnership develops organically when two people respect each other enough to work together, not against each other. The lesson was just beginning. On Thursday morning, the cracks in her theoretical paradise began to appear. She had spent 2 days trying to navigate her own system while dealing with mine at the same time, and the cognitive dissonance was already eating her up inside. I found my wife in the kitchen staring at the calendar where she had color-coded all our responsibilities. Red for her tasks, blue for mine, green for shared ones. The problem was simple. Real life doesn't follow color-coded agendas, and the world had started to play against the perfect system she tried to impose. The washing machine is making that noise again, she said without taking her eyes off her coffee. Thursday appliance maintenance is part of your technical responsibilities group, I replied, checking my phone while I ate the breakfast I had prepared on my designated day. Page 4, Section C. I don't know how to fix washing machines. Neither did I when I learned. YouTube has excellent tutorials. Very empowering. In fact, she shot me a look that could melt steel. You know I can't do that. You always assumed what I would do. I replied, but assuming certain tasks are naturally mine because of my gender is exactly the kind of unconscious bias your workshop wanted to eliminate. She opened her mouth to reply and closed it. She was slowly learning that any complaint could be turned against her using the very system she created. The washing machine continued to squeak in the background like a soundtrack to her ideological defeat. That night she tried a different approach. Instead of demanding that I fix the washing machine, she suggested we collaborate to find a solution. She was clearly trying to use the communication protocols she had invented herself. I've been thinking about how we can modify our framework to make it more practical, she began, choosing her words carefully. Maybe some tasks can be distributed based on pre-existing skills and not on rigid equality. Interesting, I mumbled without looking up from the reciprocal expectations spreadsheet I was updating. Are you suggesting that natural aptitude should prevail over ideological purity? I'm suggesting that maybe a little flexibility would help the system work better. Flexibility for whom? I asked, finally looking at her. Why does it seem like you want flexibility when the system harms you, but absolute rigidity when it harms me? She fell silent, looking for an answer that wouldn't contradict her own rules. I just think we need to be practical in the implementation. I completely agree, I replied. So, let's be practical. The washing machine is broken because of your system. The responsibility is yours. In practical reality, you don't know how to fix it. What is your proposed solution? Could you teach me? She suggested with a hint of hope. I can, I agreed, but that would require extra emotional labor on my part in planning and executing a teaching session. That would need to be compensated in some other area of the system. What are you willing to take on in return? Her frustration was overflowing. She had created a system to hold me accountable for everything, and now the same system was holding her accountable, and she, of course, didn't like it. This is ridiculous. She exploded. We're married. We should help each other. Exactly. I replied calmly. We should help each other, not restructure each other according to theories that ignore how we actually function as a team. She looked at me, and I could see the thoughts colliding in her head. For the first time since this novel began, she was understanding what I was trying to show her. The truth that no spreadsheet can solve. Marriage is not a social experiment, I continued. It's two people building a life using their individual strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. You took a system that was working and tried to fix it with theories created by people who probably never managed to maintain a long-term relationship. The workshop speaker has been married for 15 years, she retorted defensively. To the same person I asked. She hesitated. Well, but she learned from her mistakes. Did she learn, or did she just create increasingly complex theories to explain why her relationships keep failing? At that moment, the washing machine made an even more horrible noise, almost as if it were saying, he's right. She looked towards the laundry room, then at me, then at the sheets and spreadsheets scattered across the table. All of that created to correct problems that only came into existence because she decided they existed. I just wanted things to be fairer, she said quietly. Things were fair, I replied, they just weren't equal. And that's not the same thing. What's the difference? She asked. Fair is that each person contributes according to their ability and receives according to their need. Equal is that everyone does exactly the same thing, even when it doesn't make sense. She sank into the chair, defeated. So what do we do now? She asked. Now you decide if you want to be married to me or to a set of theoretical principles that demand I transform into someone else. The only sound in the house was the final groan of the dying washing machine. She had a choice, and we both knew it. The question was, Would she choose reality or ideology, the person or the system? I waited to see which woman would emerge from there. The one who had fallen in love with who I really was, or the one who had decided I needed to be rebuilt according to someone else's project. Friday arrived with the washing machine completely dead and a sink full of dishes accumulated according to our rigid rotation schedule. She had been responsible for the dishes on Wednesday, but she worked late and decided to postpone the task. According to her own system, postponements required approval from both parties and a compensation plan. I found her standing in the kitchen looking at the mess with an expression of growing panic. The reality of maintaining a home through spreadsheets and theoretical structures was finally hitting hard. "We need to do laundry," she said. "I don't have clean clothes for work." "The laundromat opens at 7, I replied, eating cereal from one of the few clean bowls. "And according to Thursday's financial tracking, laundromat expenses fall into your discretionary spending category." She turned to me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't anger or frustration, it was genuine bewilderment. "Are you really going to make me take the laundry to a laundromat just because the machine broke?" "I'm not making you do anything," I replied calmly. "I'm following the system you created, the same system that forces me to track every financial decision, document every domestic contribution, and modify my natural communication patterns to fit your approved protocols. But this is different." Different how she searched for an answer, clearly seeing the trap, but unable to escape it. "Why is it an emergency? Is it really? Or is it just a nuisance you want me to solve?" "Because it's easier than following your own rules." The silence stretched as she processed that. I saw the mental gears turning, trying to find a way to maintain her ideological position and at the same time get the practical help she needed. "Okay," she said. "Finally, I'll handle it myself." I watched her as she filled garbage bags with clothes, struggling with the awkward volumes to get everything into the car. She made 3 trips, each one more frustrating than the last. When she came back, 2 hours later, she was exhausted and visibly shaken. "The machines ate my coins," she announced, dropping the clean clothes in a pile on the living room floor. $20, and there was still a guy insisting on helping me fold the clothes, even after I told him I didn't need it. "Did you log the $20 loss in the discretionary expenses spreadsheet?" I asked. She looked at me with something close to hatred. "Are you serious? You're the one who insisted that financial transparency was essential for equality in the relationship. If we're not logging the expenses, what's the purpose of the system?" That's when she broke, not dramatically. There were no shouts or accusations, but with a silent collapse that was somehow much worse. She sat on the couch, surrounded by still damp clothes and the scattered remains of her theoretical paradise, and just stared at the wall. "This isn't working," she said quietly. "No, it's not," I agreed, "but it's working exactly as it was designed. You created a system that treats marriage like a business contract between roommates and not like a partnership between people who care about each other." I thought I was fixing things, what things needed to be fixed. She was silent for a long time. "I felt like I was doing everything," she said at last. "And you were just living your life without realizing how much work was necessary to maintain our home. So instead of talking to me about feeling undervalued, you decided to restructure our entire relationship based on theories you learned in a weekend workshop. When you put it like that, it sounds stupid." "It doesn't sound stupid," I corrected, sitting down next to her. "It sounds like you felt disconnected from me and thought the problem was structural and not communicational." She looked at me with her eyes full of tears. "I missed you while you were away, and instead of just saying that, I convinced myself that missing you was a sign of dependency that I needed to correct. So you tried to become independent, making us both miserable apparently." I pushed some clothes aside so I could sit closer. It was the first time in over a week that it felt natural instead of calculated according to some approved protocol. "You know what's funny?" I continued. "You spent all that energy trying to make our relationship more equal, but in reality, you just made it less of a partnership and more of a battlefield." "I know," she murmured. "I turned us into adversaries instead of allies." "The workshop didn't teach you how to improve the marriage. It taught you to find problems in the marriage that could only be solved by their solutions." She leaned against me, and for the first time in days I could feel the tension leaving her body, the relief of abandoning a system created to generate problems, not to solve them. "I want to throw away all these papers," she said. "Inequality and feminist theory and the restructuring of power. I want to throw that away too." At least the parts that make us treat each other like adversaries instead of partners. I felt a slight smile emerge. And now? She asked. Now we figure out how to be married to each other and not to a set of principles that demand we be different people. On Saturday morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of her humming in the kitchen, not because it was her designated day, but because she woke up first and felt like making coffee for both of us. Good morning, she said, handing me a cup as I walked into the kitchen. I was thinking about what you said yesterday about treating each other like partners and not adversaries. She pointed to the dining room table, now completely free of spreadsheets and tracking documents. I threw away the entire system. I looked at the empty table and then back at her. What made you change your mind? Sitting in that laundromat yesterday, watching other couples help each other with simple tasks while I struggled alone because of rules I created myself. She shook her head. I realized I had turned our marriage into a prison where neither of us could be spontaneous or generous without violating some theoretical principle. And now I want to fix the washing machine together with you. Not because it proves anything to anyone, but because we both need clean clothes and you know how to fix those things. I smiled. That sounds dangerously like traditional gender roles. Maybe some traditions exist because they work, not because they're oppressive, she replied, sitting down across from me. I spent so much energy trying to prove our natural dynamic was wrong that I forgot to ask if it was actually working for us. And was it working? She thought carefully. Yes, but I wasn't acknowledging it. I was looking for problems instead of appreciating what we had. So what do you want now? I want to be grateful when you fix something instead of resentful, because I can't. I want to cook when I feel like cooking and not when a spreadsheet says so. I want to ask for help without it being a political statement. And what do you want from me? I want you to notice when I do something that makes your life easier, and I want you to say when that makes you feel good. Not because equality demands recognition, but because being appreciated feels good. I reached out and took her hand. I appreciate what you do. I always have. I just assumed you knew. I didn't know until I convinced myself that appreciation was a form of patriarchal conditioning created to keep me satisfied with an unequal dynamic. That workshop really got to you. That workshop taught me to see problems everywhere and solutions nowhere. She squeezed my hand. But you taught me something more important this week. What? That equality and partnership are not the same thing. Partnership means each person contributes with what they do well and supports the other where they're weaker. Equality means both need to be good at everything, which only makes us mediocre at almost everything. I got up and kissed her forehead. So, no more feminist theory. No more the part where we let theory run over reality, she corrected. If the theory makes our life worse instead of better, then the theory is wrong, right? Our life. Great. Now let's go fix that washing machine together. Together, she repeated. Not because a spreadsheet orders it, but because that's what partners do. As we walked towards the laundry room, I realized that the woman I married was still there under all that ideology and theoretical structures. She just needed to remember that love is not something you rebuild according to external principles. It's something you build day after day by choosing the same person over and over again. The washing machine just needed a belt change. 20 minutes, $15, and everything was working again. Reddit comment. In the end, the washing machine started working again before her revolutionary system. Who would have thought a $15 belt would be more efficient than an entire workshop on power dynamics? Anyway, sometimes the simplest fix is to remember that marriage is not a graduate thesis and that love doesn't need a spreadsheet or two-way approval.